Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm just going to focus on one area where there's going to be a really significant change in the law on the 26th of October, and that's the area of sexual harassment. And I thought it would be helpful just to take you through it in a little bit of detail, not too much today, so that you've then got 6 weeks or so to kind of put in place anything that you might need to. So, um, changes in the law. So the changes in sexual harassment law, which I'm looking at today, have been quite a long time in the making. There was a government consultation back in 2019 and published the results in 2021. And following that, the Conservatives said that they were going to introduce a new duty for employers to prevent sexual harassment. And that law came into force last year. And then it's actually going to be implemented on the 26th of October this year. So I'm just going to be looking very briefly today at what sexual harassment is and what the law currently is on it, what the changes are going to be, and just some practical things you might want to think about to get ready for the changes. So what is sexual harassment? Well, I've included the definition on the slide, and Suzanne will share the slides afterwards. Essentially, it's unwanted conduct of a sexual nature which has the purpose or effect of violating dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment. Now, there's some really helpful Equality and Human Rights Commission guidance on sexual harassment in the workplace, and they give lots of examples of what might constitute sexual harassment. And I think some of the examples are quite obvious, but perhaps some of them, would not necessarily kind of immediately occur to you. So it's worth having a look at that guidance. And I think it's just really important to highlight as well, as we know, that sexual harassment applies equally to people of all genders, whilst often it is women being harassed that gets kind of well publicised. Actually, it does apply across the board. So, what is the current law? Well, at the moment, if an employee sexually harasses or harasses a colleague in the course of their employment, then the buck can stop with you as the employer, and the employer is vicariously liable for that harassment. Now, you do have the option of defending, or the ability to defend a harassment claim if an employer has taken all reasonable steps to prevent it from happening. So because there is this defence available, although it's actually very hard to rely on in practice, it's clearly advisable for businesses and best practice for businesses to be putting in place lots of reasonable steps to prevent harassment. But technically at the moment, there is no legal requirement to do that. And that's what's going to be changing on the 26th of October. So on that date, the Worker Protection Amendment of Equality Act 2010 Act 2023, it's a bit of a mouthful, will come into force. And that's going to be introducing a new duty for employers to take reasonable steps to prevent employees from being sexually harassed in the course of employment. And it's going to amend the Equality Act to introduce a new little section which provides for that. Now, it's just worth flagging that this new duty only applies to sexual harassment. So it doesn't apply to any of the other forms of harassment, whether it be age, race, disability, or simply on the ground of kind of gender, so kind of standard harassment based on sex. So it's just sexual harassment specifically that this extension will apply to. Okay, so there is a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent harassment, but what are reasonable steps? Well, as we often see, helpfully, it's not defined in the legislation. So it's a little bit of an unknown at the moment. We expect that reasonable steps will be interpreted in quite a similar way to how the tribunal interpret it now. So, for example, when they're looking at that defence, has a business taken all reasonable steps to prevent harassment? And it's going to be looking at, the size of the employer, the nature of the workplace, the industry you operate in, risks particularly that you might face within your workplace. So it's always going to be quite practical and quite proportional. proportionate. It's going to depend on your, the time, cost, and business disruption as well. There is some really helpful guidance again in the EHRC guide on preventing sexual harassment. And I will share a link to that with Suzanne with the slides, because it's really worth a read. That guide's been in place actually since 2020. It's not a mandatory guide to follow, but it does have a lot of information about how you might prevent harassment in your workplace. So a lot of that is now going to be really, really relevant. The EHRC is actually going to be updating their guidance as well. We expect that sometime in September, so that it has been updated prior to this change in the law in October. Okay, so there is no guidance in the legislation on reasonable steps. So I'm just going to run through some of the kind of key areas that based on previous guidance and case law and so on, you're going to want to be thinking about to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. So I think the first thing that's really important is education and raising awareness. It's really, really key, I think, as a business and as a management team to actually understand what sexual harassment is. And then you'll need to devise and roll out mandatory training to all staff. That's going to need to cover, what is sexual harassment? What standards of behaviour do you expect in the workplace? How people might go about raising a complaint. It's always wise to provide additional training for managers and people that are going to be perhaps dealing with complaints and things day to day. And I'd also just highlight that having a bog standard training course that you just rubber stamp and roll out every now and then doesn't tend to cut it from a tribunal's perspective. They will expect it to be, tailored to your business and the risks, particularly that there might be of harassment, for example, in your business. And it needs to be refreshed, and it can't just be a tick box exercise. So it's really worth spending some time thinking about that training piece. The second thing that's really important is having a policy. Obviously, we talk a lot about policies as lawyers, but it is going to be really important to have an anti-harassment policy if you don't have one already, which does specifically address the issue of sexual harassment as well. As with all policies, not enough just to have it in a cupboard or on the intranet. You do need to make sure it's really brought to the attention of all employees. In terms of guidance of what sorts of things you might want to include in that, again, the EHRC guidance does kind of have some, potential ingredients and contents for you. So it's worth having a look at that. But a policy is really going to need to be setting out, what it is, how employees can make a complaint, how those complaints will be dealt with, what the repercussions might be if there has been, some wrongdoing, etc. Right, sorry. Okay. Culture, again, is going to be really, really important. People already have a zero tolerance culture in respect of lots of different forms of discrimination. And this is just a slight extension to that. Just going to be really, really important to have that zero tolerance of, any sort of sexual harassment, any hint or sniff of it at all, which is supported by senior management. Again, the culture should really encourage the reporting of sexual harassment, that if somebody feels uncomfortable or sees something or experiences something, that they are encouraged to come forward, and they know how to do that. Again, it's really important as well, if a complaint is raised, to make sure that's dealt with properly, to make sure that the outcome of that is monitored, to ensure there's no sort of victimization of someone that may have raised a complaint in the past, or any sort of bad feeling or problems between employees. Third party harassment is another interesting issue. When the government first kind of talked about changing the law on harassment, they did look at potentially bringing in something that specifically made employers liable if an employee was harassed by a third party. They dialed back on that during the kind of the legislation process, and that's not now specifically included within the Equality Act. But again, it is a really important aspect for businesses to bear in mind, as part of your duty of care and everything else as well. So again, I think the harassment policy should address the fact that, if an employee feels they've been sexually harassed by a third party, whether it's a supplier, a customer, a client, whatever that may be, that is something to report to you, and it is something that will be looked at and taken very seriously. Workplace champions are again something that you might want to consider. Somebody a bit like with a menopause champion or another form of champion that you might have in your workplace. Someone that really can support and provide advice to somebody who has witnessed or experienced sexual harassment themselves. It may be an HR person, it may be a senior person. It doesn't really matter. It's just identifying kind of the right person and giving them the training and support to kind of fulfill that role. And again, I think it's important to flag it's really good if it's not just women that are, say a workplace champion for harassment, actually having a senior male leader or, a male colleague that would be, keen and kind of help, appropriate to do that would be great because actually what it shows is that all employees play a role in tackling harassment and actually that men can be victims of it as well. So I think that's, quite a healthy and helpful thing if that's appropriate and possible in your business. Staff surveys, again, is something you might want to think about. People, again, often do staff surveys, but, having an aspect of harassment within that or kind of questions about potential harassment in that can be quite helpful. I think just to identify, whether people do feel internally or perhaps in relation to third parties that there might be issues or instances of harassment. If employees do feel that they have seen something or that, the culture's not quite right, again, that might be flagged on a confidential basis in a staff survey. You could also consider potentially a risk assessment if you feel you are perhaps operating in an industry or an area where harassment is more likely to occur, sorry. Okay, so what if employers don't comply with this new duty? Well, there isn't the ability to bring a separate claim to say my employer failed to prevent sexual harassment. So it's not a freestanding claim, but it can be tagged on to another harassment claim or sexual harassment claim. So, and if an employee does succeed in that claim in the tribunal will scrutinise the processes, the policies, etc., that a business have in place. And if they feel that that business has not taken reasonable steps to prevent the harassment from happening, they can actually uplift the compensation awarded by up to 25%. So this is a little bit like, the uplift that you can face if there's an unreasonable breach of the ACAS code on disciplinary and grievance, but it's going to apply equally and the same uplift kind of mechanism in sexual harassment cases. I think it's also important to flag that uplift wouldn't just apply to compensation awarded for sexual harassment per se. If, for example, someone had brought a claim for race harassment, sexual harassment, multiple forms of harassment, for example, that uplift would apply to all the compensation that was awarded to them across the board. So obviously it could be quite expensive. Also, just to flag that the EHRC do have the power to kind of unilaterally come in to a business and investigate if they feel that something is awry for some reason. And they don't, there doesn't have to be a tribunal claim for that to happen. So again, it's just worth noting that they do have that ability to come in to investigate and to issue notices and require various action to be taken. And I think with all of these things, whether it be claims, whether it be EHRC involvement, clearly it's very damaging to business. It will attract adverse public attention. It will damage employee engagement and so on within the workplace. So, it's going to be really, really important to get all of this right. So finally, will Labour change things? So as I've said, all of this, the changes that are coming into force next month actually are Conservative changes that have just taken time to filter through and actually come into force. So will Labour change things or make things any different to that? Well, in their plan to make work pay before the election, they did say that they wanted to properly tackle sexual harassment at work. And so we suspect that, when time allows, because they are quite busy, as we know, doing lots of other things, they will revisit this area. And the things that they may look to do would be to strengthen that duty that the Conservatives have now kind of imposed to take reasonable steps to prevent harassment, and perhaps, require employers to take all reasonable steps. And that might not sound like a big difference, but actually taking reasonable steps might be a reasonably low bar. We're not quite sure where the threshold will sit yet. And it may be that Labour will look to strengthen that. And the other thing that they may look to do is actually to have some specific liability for employers where there is third-party harassment of an employee. So I think it would just be a question of watching this space. But for the time being, we just need to be focusing on, what is definitely coming into force on the 26th of October and trying to get ready for that. So that's everything. Just a very quick whistle-stop tour through the changes. But if anyone has any questions, please, feel free to raise them now, or drop me an email or give me a call. I'd be really happy to help. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks, Sarah. Anybody got any questions for Sarah? Can we?
So first of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Kate, and I'm Head of Talent Acquisition at Connectr. A bit about us, because we're not a household name, or at least not yet. We deliver end-to-end talent acquisition services for companies that embrace value of different, and that's companies in all sector. We're not sector specific. Our expertise initially lay in early careers, in graduates, interns, and apprentices. But due to our belief in the commercial and societal benefit of diverse and multi-generational teams, we work with lots of other groups, like the over 50s, like returners. But whatever type of hiring we're doing, we always like to fish in different pools to look for untapped talent that is so often missed. So, as I said, AI has just appeared very, very quickly. Well, certainly for me anyway. And there's a lot of noise around the subject. There's a lot of very conflicting information out there. But I think what is undeniably true is that it is making it obvious that a typical recruitment process is very vulnerable. So when you think about AI and chatbots, most people's first thought is probably ChatGPT. It's been around for a long time. The first iteration was in June 2018, but it's evolved significantly since then. Now might be a good time to throw in the name of a few other AI chatbots that people are perhaps less familiar with. There is a chatbot called Perplexity, which is absolutely brilliant for research, and I don't really tend to use Google very much now. There's Claude, which is a direct competitor to ChatGPT, but apparently it's got a better sense of humour. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's its selling point, and it's great for writing. Gemini is Google's AI assistant, and that isn't something that I currently use. And Poe is a chatbot platform that offers access to all of those AI models. And most of these you don't have to have a paid subscription for. So yeah, I can't vouch for Gemini or Poe, but Perplexity and Claude are I find it very useful. Now, it wasn't until ChatGPT launched, until ChatGPT 3.5 launched in November 2022, that the world started acknowledging this groundbreaking technology, because from that point, we are able to interact with ChatGPT directly and ask it questions and receive responses. But in May of this year, and I don't think it's been rolled out in its entirety, but there's the most recent iteration, which is ChatGPT 4.0. which isn't to be confused with ChatGPT 4.0, which is, I think, the version that perhaps most people are using now. 4.0, and the O stands for Omni, can reason across audio, vision, and text in real time. You don't even have to give it any instructions. You don't have to prompt it. So in the case of a candidate could be sent a psychometric test or a case study as part of the assessment process. And all they would need to do is screenshot that and upload it to ChatGPT 4.0, and it would give them the answer immediately. It doesn't need any instructions. It will just do it, which is quite mind-boggling, I think. And whilst I'm, showing off my AI knowledge, there are 3 other applications. I mean, there are lots, obviously, that aren't necessarily related to recruitment, but are really helpful in the workplace. One is EasyGen, which is a LinkedIn post generator, and one is Gamma, which is a slide generator. I think it can generate perfect slides and also websites, and you don't even need to have any coding ability. And then finally, there is something called Opus Clip, which is a video editor. And I actually had a conversation with a colleague earlier who was talking about trying to cut down a video that she'd made at an event yesterday, and how was she going to do that? And it was kind of like, oh, I think I might know the answers to that. It's Opus Clip, but I haven't used any of those. So going back to recruitment specifically, what is the impact of this on a traditional recruitment process? And I am really focusing on early careers at the moment. I think it'll catch on, and I think it'll be something that's that all groups use, but it's very prevalent, obviously, around with Gen Z. So how are they using AI? They're using it to generate and improve CVs. They're using it to write cover letters. They're using it to make job applications. There are probably several, but there are a couple of software applications that I'm aware of. One is Lazy Apply and one is CV Loop, and they're both Chrome browser extensions. And the extensions use AI to automate the job application process, and they can be used on platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed. So all a candidate needs to do is upload their CV and the type of job that they want to apply for, and press go. And it will apply for hundreds, maybe even thousands of jobs on your behalf. They're using it to complete psychometric tests. So think verbal and numerical reasoning and situational tests. They're using it to prepare for interviews and assessment centres. So you can, if you use the voice chat setting in ChatGPT 4.0, you can practice 2-way interviews. You can ask it to give you interview questions with answers. You can even
seems to have lost Kate. I was too busy writing down 2-way chat conversation.
Maybe if I take my camera off, that might help.
Okay, well, you are back. Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
And it can also, and now I haven't, I think I might have interviewed somebody who did this. I'm not sure, but what I believe it can do is it can be used to answer telephone interview and digital interview questions in real time. So I don't know how widespread it is, but there is a Chrome extension called AI Apply, which acts as a real-time interview buddy. Now, you might think that if you're interviewing somebody on Teams, that you would be aware if something to the left or right of them was giving them answers in real time. But if they use a piece of software called NVIDIA Broadcast, that allows you to read something to the side of your screen, but it looks as though you're looking straight at the camera. So I've talked very briefly about how candidates are using AI in their recruitment process, but I think I should give a bit of context about why. And it's because, you know, the biggest number of users at the moment are Gen Z. They're digital natives, and using AI is not seen as cheating. It's seen as part of their life. And there isn't a huge amount of research, but what research there is out there has been done by Arctic Shores, who are a task-based assessment provider, and it's quite comprehensive research. They surveyed 2,000 students and adults in the first 2 years of their career, and what they found was 88% said they use Gen AI tools, and 59% said they have or would use Gen AI in the selection process. And the research also went on to say that a third of students said they didn't want to work for an employer who says they can't use AI, and 50% think that an employer would be really behind the times if they banned its use in the process, particularly if it's used in the role that they are applying for. There's also really strong evidence to show that Gen AI supports diversity, that people from Black and mixed ethnic backgrounds are much more likely to use it than white candidates. And again, neurodiverse candidates are much more likely to use it perhaps than their neurotypical peers. So if anyone's wondering, or anyone was thinking, well, why don't you just ban its use? There would be so many pitfalls if you do that. Not least of all, it might really impact on, you know, an organization's DE&I strategy, but it doesn't make them an employer of choice for a lot of candidates. So, you know, I would argue that if employers want to maintain an equitable and efficient hiring process that attracts the best candidates for them, they have only one option, and that is to embrace and guide the candidates' use of AI. So, unsurprisingly, this is causing a lot of pain for recruiters and employers. In a nutshell, there's a lot of matchy-matchy answers, a lot of generic content, a lot of samey cover letters and application form answers. There is a huge increase in the volume of applications. Most recently, we ran a technology graduate program for a client, and I think we got at least 4 times the number of applications that we would typically expect. And I'm afraid a lot of the answers to the application form questions were identical. And of course, that makes it very difficult to screen. You know, the volume is challenging, but also, yeah, trying to work out what's authentic and what isn't is quite challenging. Something else, obviously, that's problematic. You know, can you rely on psychometric test results? ChatGPT 4.0 outperforms 98.8% of candidates in verbal reasoning and numerical tests, and scores in the 70th percentile in situational judgment tests. And, you know, if CVs and applications and test results are enhanced through the use of AI, can an employer be sure that what they see is what they're going to get? Are employers going to find that they are hiring, you know, the wrong people for their opportunities? Another challenging thing is agreeing a policy around the use of AI in the process. And I suppose the biggest challenge of all is knowing what is best practice in these rapidly changing times. What do we need to be doing differently? So there are some things that you can do for sure. When things change rapidly, it is hard to know what to do. Some organizations are putting their head in the sand, others are panicking, and many are simply unsure where to turn for solutions. I mean, I have spoken to people who still are trying to convince themselves that actually we're not really at that point yet, but I think that is putting your head in the sand, to be frank. At Connectr, we're trying to be thoughtful and proactive and starting to find ways to embrace the technology whilst trying to define ways to manage it. One of the things I think that for people that, for whom this is a problem, one of the things to do is to try and make sure that you're keeping yourself up to date with, the rapidly changing landscape. The way I've been keeping myself up to date is I've joined a lot of networks on LinkedIn. I've listened to a lot of sort of, thought leaders in this area, a lot of podcasts. It's also, but there are some practical actions that you can take and that we're going to take at this particular juncture. First of all, we're going to be looking at alternatives to traditional CVs. We have come across a platform called Visi. Visi describes itself as a human technology platform, and I suppose the best way to describe it really is to think Pinterest meets Pinterest has a baby with LinkedIn. Um, it encourages people to talk about themselves rather than to rely on chat GPT to sort of shape and generate the content that they put on their CV. So you can upload photographs, you can upload video clips. It's I suppose it's a bit sort of magazine like, and what they're looking to do is to solve the problems that CVs create. I think most people feel that CVs, I mean, I've listened to so many things, so many people talking about the fact that CVs have to go, but what on earth are we going to do to replace them because they're so entrenched in all of our processes? But they do really benefit people that have got, good academics and who have got good work experience and who have done lots of things. And I think sometimes, we do miss a lot of talent when we rely just on that. I'm sure there are alternatives to Visi, but that is just something that I've discovered recently that I think could be a potential solution to one of many problems. The other thing that we're going to be doing is updating and shortening our application forms and using questions that require very personalized responses. So steering questions towards the candidate and not their motivations. We're going to be adapting the questions that we ask either at a telephone interview stage or at a video interview stage to include, again, much more human and probing questions that require self-reflection and personal insight, and questions that explore a candidate's values to see how they fit with a particular organization. And we have never moved away from face-to-face endpoint assessments. We always do that with the clients that we work with, but I know a lot of organizations have, and in many cases they have for very good reason. But I think it's going to be that they will come back. And in fact, yesterday in the Financial Times, I saw an article stating that Deloitte are bringing face-to-face endpoint assessments back now, having run them all virtually, probably since COVID. And if you do that, as an assessment center, or even if your final point is an interview, you can test for technical expertise there. You can test for complex thinking, through the use of case studies. Obviously, you can run group exercises, and you can. I think we might look to see if we can devise some assessment activities that actually embrace AI and design exercises, that look for effective use of these tools rather than try and pretend that, AI isn't out there. And just, I suppose, sort of finally, it's not one-sided, and there's always going to be AI tools out there to sort of manage other AI tools. So there are lots of AI tools out there for recruiters. MetaView is an AI-powered interview note taker that I have used and is very good. There is Pop AI, which automatically matches and ranks every candidate with explainable AI. And it automatically engages suitable candidates with human-like conversations via WhatsApp, SMS, or email. I haven't used that. I think the aim of that particular piece of software is to really try and deal with the sort of screening, issue that's arising through the sheer volumes that we're seeing. There is Equitus. Again, I haven't used it, but that's an interview intelligence software designed to facilitate fair and inclusive hiring practices. There's something called Seek Out AI, which is an advanced talent intelligent platform that leverages artificial intelligence to assist recruiters and HR professionals in finding, engaging, and managing talent. So that's obviously got a sort of sourcing tool element to it. And then Willow is a video interviewing and candidate screening software that aims to simplify the hiring process. I haven't used that, but I just thought it might be quite interesting to just throw in a few sort of things that I have come across, and I do know other people are using. Fine, finally, it's I think everybody feels as though they're hanging on to the coattails of AI because it is just moving so quickly, and this is just I suppose my interpretation of where we are currently. But it is really important, I think, that companies develop a strategic response to Gen AI, particularly those organizations that have an early careers piece to their talent team, but certainly not just limited to that. As I discussed earlier, it's probably not wise to ban it, but I think it's really wise to give guidance on how candidates can use it. And some suggested wording could be around, we embrace it, innovation, but we also value authenticity, and just remind candidates that their application form and their CV, it's their chance to shine. So we don't simply condone any cutting and pasting of AI generated responses, because increasingly that is really clear when people have done that. It's about encouraging candidates to use AI as a tool to refine and develop original thoughts. So, and it's also really important to understand the type of AI that you're going to use. We went from having an ATS to having a tech stack. But a lot of thought has gone into what we've put into that tech stack. It is a bit of an AI gold rush at the moment. There are a lot of people out there who claim to have a solution. And there are lots of people saying, no, that solution's not right. My solution is right. So, do beware of strangers bearing gifts. You really have to, I think very carefully about what you might wish to implement. And also, let's not forget candidate experience. And ironically, even though I started talking about how we are seeing candidates using AI in the recruitment process and how they don't feel that they're using it to cheat in any way, they don't like a recruitment process that doesn't allow them to engage with a human in the process, and they don't like the thought that their applications are being screened out by AI. So I think a human touch is more important than ever. It's great to have, sort of automated solutions. It creates lots of efficiencies, but that human touch is really, really still extremely important. So that was my final piece. If anyone's got any questions, please let me know, or please contact me, you know, at a later date if you suddenly think of something, or if you want to chat something through. I'd be really happy. I've become quite fascinated by the subject in a way I didn't think that I would. I become that annoying person that comes into the office saying, have you heard, have you seen, have you tried, shall we have a look? Anyway, that's all from me.
Thank you.